everybody, this is Anthony Brogdon on Strong Inspiration, and I got a brother on the channel. Hey, check it out. I got guests that really excited about being on the channel. I got one, he called me and said, let's go. I was kind of, I don't know, I ain't gonna say I forgot because I knew he was on my calendar, but I don't know, I was kind of slipping. I don't really slip, but I slipped a little bit. My man called me and said, man, we on in 30 minutes. I'm ready to get it on Strong Inspiration and give you this good information that your viewers need to know. And I'm saying, all right. And so I'm so grateful that he is on the channel. I've been talking to him for a while, and here we are today, my brothers and my sisters. So what I say to you is subscribe to the channel. It's free. You don't give no information. All you do is hit the button. Like this video, because I know my man gonna put something on your head that is gonna blow your mind, and you need to just say, I like it. You know what I mean? It's them, help us know what we're doing and whatever. I need you to hit that notifications bell so that when videos come up, and I'm doing 4 or 5 a week, and I put one up at 2 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep and it was ready to go. So you get a ding when there's a new video, and then tell somebody about Strong Inspirations. All right, my friends, I truly appreciate it. You'll feel better when you tell them about this channel, because what I'm doing here, in easy to understand terms, is keeping Black history alive, where I let the people who know tell the stories. That's what I'm doing. And I'm finding some amazing stories like the brother that's on the channel today. It's amazing stuff. And I just asked a couple questions. The other thing I like for you to do is, I'm a filmmaker, so I'm serious. I do research too. And I did this documentary. It took me 3 years of my life to pull this off. I hired the crew, did all the research, so on and so forth. It's called Business in the Black, The Rise of Black Business in America. Slaves went to college, slaves who own businesses, slaves who use their money to buy their freedom. They don't teach that in school. And you have your kids watch this, and it's streaming on Amazon. This is the DVD. But people don't have the DVD players, so just go ahead and download it. Also, I wrote a book on Black history. But again, my angle is business. I loved knowing the brothers and sisters who are in business, and that's what I talk about. It's called Black Business Book. I got over 200 facts, and at least 150 Black-owned businesses and organizations. I name all the HBCUs, all the fraternities and sororities. I name at least 40 different organizations, Black lawyers, doctors, dentists, real estate, insurance, all that's in here, going back to the 1800s. How about this? I stop at 1960, and the last fact, believe it or not, is about Motown, which was a conglomerate. What that Berry Gordy man did was huge, and I put it in my book. So I need you to get a copy of this, and you get one, I'll autograph it. My man's sitting there waiting. I got to ask him, wait one more second. I autograph it, and every 10th book I sell, I donate one to a school. So when schools start back up in the fall, I got about at least 40, 50 books, because my sales is, they coming along, that I'm donating to schools across the country. You buy 10 books, I donate one in your honor. You donate all 10 of them. Let them kids know this information. And then lastly, I use that term strong a lot. Strong stands for strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. Something I came up with, which is my lead in to my guest. He's a strong brother. Watch out. Come on, man. We about to rock and roll. I'm feeling the vibes. All right, my friends. Sir, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
How you doing, Anthony? My name is Brian Rogers. I am a historian and a community relations liaison at the Mosaic Templars Cultural Center in Little Rock, Arkansas. Um, we are Arkansas's Museum of African American History and Culture, and we're named after a Black business that was started right here in Little Rock in 1883 called the Mosaic Templars of America. And now, what the Mosaic Templars of America did, they were a fraternal organization that provided burial and health insurance to Black families in Little Rock, starting in 1882.
Okay, hold on, let me stop you there. I don't mean
All
no
right?
disrespect, my brother, but we this, I do this every now and then because a question pop in my mind. I gotta ask it.
Gotcha.
How you get to be who you are, man? Where you grow up at, and why you like history like you do?
So I grew up in North Little Rock, which is, just it's a suburb of the city of Little Rock. And I used to
It's a
sit.
black town. It's a black town where you grew
No,
up.
no, actually, it's about 50-50.
Okay, okay.
So I grew up watching cowboy movies with my granny, my great grandmother, and I would ask her, "Granny, is that real?" And she would tell me, "Go look it up." And so that started my love of history, and it got to the point where I would just flip through the encyclopedia because back in the '80s we had
Oh,
encyclopedias and not
sure.
Google, and so I would just flip through the encyclopedia and read different entries about historical events, and so that's how I got. That's how I developed my love of history.
Was there one event or something that is your moment that your ha said, man, you found something that you didn't know that kind of blew your mind?
Um, I don't know. I don't know. I think it was just starting out reading about historical events, right? But one memory that is kind of just burned into my memory happened when I was in the 8th grade and we were studying the Civil War. And so my history teacher said that the Civil War was fought over states' rights. And so, me being who I was, I raised my hand and I said, "That's not right." And she was like, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, yeah, states' rights was involved, but it was the states' rights to own slaves." And she told me that I was wrong. And I said, "Well, if you're going to teach it, you can at least teach the truth."
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then I was removed from that class. So I think that's kind of the moment where I said, I want to be someone who teaches history but teaches it correctly, you know?
Okay, so you that was pretty pretty tough move that you did on that lady to tell her that, and then did the rest of the students laugh or say, "Hey man, this guy he always know what he's talking about anyway," or was it, how did that go? If I may
Well,
ask.
they laughed and I was put out of class. So, I'm not sure how the rest of the semester went,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
they put me out.
Is there a Black history story in Little Rock?
There are several Black history stories here in the city of Little Rock. And that's one of the things that I when I do talks about the civil rights movement, I tell people all the time, like when people think of the civil rights movement, they think of places like Atlanta and Birmingham and Memphis. I said, but Little Rock has all of those stories too. We had students from one of our local HBCUs that held sit-ins at the downtown lunch counters to help desegregate the lunch counters. We had in 1891, there was a group of Black men uh, who marched to the state capitol to protest the separate coach law that they were uh, getting ready to pass. So all of those stories that happened all through the South, they happened in Little Rock too. And I think the story that most people know is the 1957 desegregation of Little Rock Central High School,
Right.
where the governor called in the National Guard and then President Eisenhower nationalized or called in the 101st Airborne to escort the students. So I think that Little Rock has its share of stories. Yeah.
Now let's go on that one. Oh, hold on. Let's go back a little bit before that. Uh, was there slave plantations in Little Rock? Was that, there was slavery in Arkansas, right?
Yes, yes, there was. There was quite a bit of slavery in the River Valley, which is kind of like middle of the state down, middle of the state south. That's kind of the area that has good land that was good for plantations. So, the river valleys, the Delta, because we border the Mississippi River. So you had quite a bit of fertile land there. So you had large plantations.
Was it cotton?
Yeah, it was cotton. Cotton and rice. Well, rice came later, but cotton early on.
Is there one big known plantation and plantation guy, that kind of thing?
Yeah, well, I don't think that it's very well known, not like the Whitney plantation but there's a town called Lake Village that had a really large plantation, and that's in like the southeast corner of the state, bordering on Mississippi and Louisiana.
Oh, okay. Now, when you talk about Little Rock, is Little Rock the capital of Arkansas?
Yes, it is. It's the capital of Arkansas,
okay.
Kind of the center of commerce, and it's the seat of government. So it's the largest city and one of the most economically viable cities in the state.
That leads to this question. When you live in a capital city or you live in a big city, and maybe you can go this back even to slavery or even up through the civil rights. Is that a different, I'm almost sure it is, but is that a different dynamic living in a big city than in the rural areas of Arkansas?
Yeah, it is actually. I was having a discussion with some colleagues a week or so ago. We were talking about the difference between urban slavery and rural slavery. And so most people, when they think about slavery, they think about these giant plantations with 100 to 200 slaves on them. But urban slavery was different. These were, you had households with, 3 or 4, maybe 5 enslaved people, and they did different tasks, like they were drivers and maids and cooks. And most of them did not live in the place where they served as slaves. They were allowed to live off site and then commute each morning and evening.
Was there a slave auction site in Arkansas? Was it something like that? Did you know?
The closest one was Memphis, so there wasn't really a major slave auction site here, but Auction Street on Memphis is where the major slave auction site in this general area was.
So, okay, how about that then? We own something. So if it's in Memphis, the guy who and the people who own slaves there, did most slave owners get their slaves at an auction site? Would you suspect in some of them towns?
Yeah, they would travel to Memphis. Memphis was only a few hours coach ride away. And they would travel to Memphis, or there would be, or they would, there was the internal slave trade too, where people would buy and sell slaves between plantations.
Okay, so then they had to go to an auction to do that,
right? And a lot of, well, you think about the slave trade ended in the United States in the early 1800s. So. Right. Anybody who was enslaved after that point, they were born into slavery, and so they were kind of a descendant of a slave on a particular plantation. Right. And sometimes you would have enslaved people who were sold between plantations. We also saw a lot of migration from other parts of the South Carolina, Georgia, that part, into the interior of the South, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Tennessee. So you saw a lot of people moving from the eastern seaboard to the middle of the South, which is where we are.
And that leads to my next question. If I was a slave enslaved in Arkansas, how did I flee, knowing that I'm so inland and I can't get up north so close? Where did most of them who escaped go? How did that work out?
Well, there was a Southern Underground Railroad too that went to Mexico. And so enslaved people that you see leaving Arkansas, Texas, Louisiana, a lot of them went south and went into Mexico because slavery had been outlawed in Mexico early on.
Is there a Harriet Tubman that went to, that brought a lot of them to Mexico, or somebody noted in that regard?
Not that I know of. I think that research into the Southern Underground Railroad is still pretty new, so we don't know a lot about it like we do with the the trip to Canada and Harriet Tubman and some of the other abolitionists who
Right.
helped enslaved people escape to the north.
I got one more question on that. I like this escape thing. How do you think that happened? That a enslaved person could escape and get all the way to Mexico from Arkansas?
Well, I mean, it's a shorter trip than going to Canada.
Yeah.
You think about it. Enslaved people who left Virginia or South Carolina and went to Canada, that's a longer trip than it is to Mexico. And so it pretty much happened the same way. They travel by night. They travel through very mostly rural areas with swamps and forests, and they used the light of the moon and the stars, and they made their way south.
Now, as we talk about Arkansas, and there was a particular story I suspect that you wanted to talk about in terms of the museum or something of that sort.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about a guy who lived in Pine Bluff, Arkansas, which is about a 45-minute drive from Little Rock. His name was Wiley Jones.
Wiley Jones.
Wiley Jones. And
Right.
now a lot of people know the story of Wiley Jones because he was the first Black man in the country to own and operate a streetcar company. But there is so much more to his life than just this streetcar company. And so he was born in Georgia in 1848. And now his mother was enslaved and her name was Anne. And she belonged to a man named George Jones. And George was not only Anne's enslaver, but he was also the father of her 6 children. I think that's one of the things that a lot of people have heard the story of Thomas Jefferson and the fact that he had children by the enslaved woman Sally Hemings.
Right.
But I am a historian who believes that it's impossible for an enslaved woman to have a consensual relationship with a slave owner or any white man for that matter, because the power dynamic is too great, right?
Right.
The difference in power. So these children were born to a non-consensual relationship. And in other words, he was raping this woman continually and having children by her. And so at some point in the 1850s, George Jones decides that he's going to move from Georgia to Arkansas, and he's going to take all of his possessions, including Anne and their children. So they end up.
So let me stop you. So is he brutal to her, or can you imagine, or he's kind of giving the kids a step up?
We don't know. We don't know at all. We don't know the relationship between George and Anne or the George and the children. But what we do know is that in the 1850s, they end up in Arkansas. Shortly after that, George Jones dies. Now, Anne had believed for quite some time that upon George's death, that her and her children would be freed, yet there was no paperwork found. So when his assets were liquidated, she and her children were sold to another slave owner by the name of George Yale. No, I'm sorry, Yale. His last name was Yale. He was a plantation owner here in Arkansas, north of Pine Bluff. And when Wiley turned 10, he was given to the Yale son as a wedding gift.
Now, let me go back. You said he was born free.
No, he was born. No, he was born enslaved.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Okay, he was enslaved.
So, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
But what I said was that the mother thought that when George died,
right,
that her and the children would be free.
Right. I got you.
So Wiley was given as a wedding gift to the Yale son, and about 3 years later, the Civil War breaks out, and the younger Yale he enlists in the army, and he goes to fight in the war. And so Wiley, who was his possession, was forced to go to war with his enslaver, and they went and fought in several battles.
Okay, that's deep, man. I'm forced to go. What did you think he did in the war?
He was a slave. He was a camp slave. So he would take care of the horse, his owner's horse. He would make sure that he, had food and
I
water,
got you. I
and
got
that
you.
his uniforms were there when he needed, and that he had all the things that he needed to be a Southerner in war. So, because they still tried to live this genteel life that they imagined being as part of the Southern aristocracy here in the South.
I got you. Let me ask you this. Do you think that he's brainwashed to the point that, okay, my man said your life is so good, it'd be bad without me, to where, okay, it's a war and I'm helping you fight this war, and I don't do something to say, while you sleep one night, let me run over there where the northern troop is and I'm done. Or let me put a little bit of something in your water and I'm done. How does he maintain this guy to do that, even knowing that the guy knowing that, man, I'm just a day away from being up under you?
Well, he was a child, right?
I see.
He was no more than 13 or 14 years old.
Oh, I see.
So he was a child. He was, a couple of 100 miles away from home.
I see. I see.
And as a matter of fact, the younger Yale's son was killed in the Battle of Mount Pleasant in Louisiana. And at that time, the Yales had relocated to Texas. A lot of slave owners in this part of the country would flee to Texas as the Union Army advanced through the South.
I got you.
Because Texas was still the frontier. It was huge. The Union Army hadn't made very many inroads into Texas. And so slave owners would flee with their enslaved people and their households to Texas. And so what Wiley did upon the death of the Yale's son is that he made his way to Waco, Texas, where his family was.
Okay.
So after that, which we don't know a lot about what he did in Waco, other than he drove a wagon back and forth to the cotton gin. But they end up back in Monticello in Drew County, which is southeastern Arkansas. And they were there for a while. And after the war ended, they made their way back to Pine Bluff. And so Wiley's sister married a man named Ben Reed, who was a barber and owned a barber shop in Pine Bluff.
Okay.
So Wiley went and he apprenticed as a barber, and he started cutting hair and he started saving money. And so, the war is over, so he's a free man. So he's trying to make his way in the world. So what he starts to do is he worked several jobs at the time. He was a cook at a hotel as well as a barber. So since the hotel allowed him free room and board, he would save his money that he earned from cutting hair, and he would loan it to Black people and charge interest.
Oh, man, okay.
So he started making money like that, and he started to invest in real estate around the city.
Okay.
He also, at the time, fell in love with harness racing. So he bought a couple of horses, and he began to race his horses in the country and in Canada. One of his horses broke the Canadian record for a while, held the Canadian record for a while. And so he started to earn some international acclaim from his horses.
Now, hold on. Let's go back to this. What years do you think this is happening where he's starting to do this, get these horses and whatever? I mean, how old is he?
He's probably in his early 20s.
Really?
So this is 1868, 1869.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's beginning to carve out a place for himself in the world at this time.
You got to think though, and like in my 20s, man, I don't know if I was that sharp. you come out of slavery, and then you got an entrepreneurial mindset.
Well, I mean, you have to, right? So you think about it. They were facing a world that was foreign to them, right? You had lived the first 15 to 20 years of your life enslaved, not
Right.
being able to make any decisions for yourself. And then overnight, you're a free man. You have to figure it all out on your own, right? There were no welfare organizations to go to. Yeah, for a time, the Freedmen's Bureau operated in Pine Bluff, excuse me,
Mm-hmm.
but the Freedmen's Bureau, soon went away in 1868, 1869.
Right.
The Freedmen's Bureau is kind of, it kind of becomes defunct, and so people are having to figure out how they're going to make it on their own.
Did he have any education?
From what we know, he went to just a couple of years of some of the freedmen school and some of the missionary schools in the area. Not sure if he could write. Haven't come across any documents that he wrote on his own.
Okay.
But he was very business savvy.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Right. So in addition to lending money, buying real estate, he opened a saloon, became a wholesale real estate. I'm sorry, a wholesale liquor distributor.
Really?
He owned several pieces of real estate, and he built a 55-acre racing complex called Wiley Jones Park. It had a racetrack, it had a baseball diamond, and it had area for him to house his cattle and horses. So he also had a herd of cattle and some horses.
Okay, if you don't mind, now you I know you said it, but where is he doing this at? In Texas or back in Arkansas?
Back in Arkansas, in Pine Bluff, Arkansas.
In Pine Bluff. So
Yeah.
I mean, but okay, you're a black man. Jim Crow was going strong. They didn't try to jam him up and take all this from him?
Jim Crow wasn't going strong in the 1860s and 1870s.
Okay.
Right, Jim Crow you start to see the first laws being passed at the end of the 1890s and in the 1880s, moving into the 1890s.
So this is that Reconstruction period where
this had a little Reconstruction, yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of, it was kind of easy on him, I guess, at this point for him to do all this.
I wouldn't say easy, but I would say he had a lot more freedom to move around. And he had a lot more agency during this period. As a matter of fact, during this period between the end of the 1860s and the mid-1890s, there were 96 men who were elected to either the Arkansas Senate or the Arkansas House of Representatives. Ooh. So you actually saw quite a bit of representation.
Yeah.
And the last black man was pushed out in the 1890s, and it would be the 1970s before you saw any black representation in the state.
Whoa. So did he have to have do you know or don't know, did he have to have a white guy front for him to buy and do some of the things he did?
He did not. So Pine Bluff was one of those unique places that was a majority black city.
Yeah.
And so he did not have a white man fronting for him in his business operations, but he did operate in the political world with aiding one of the featured governors of the state of Arkansas.
Okay.
Who was a Union general who settled in Arkansas after the war in the area of Pine Bluff and became politically active, eventually becoming governor of the state of Arkansas.
Okay.
And so he had what we call a client relationship with Powell Clayton.
Okay.
He was an advisor to Powell Clayton, and in response to him being an advisor, he was given some political authority in the city.
I got you.
And so, yeah, he was politically active. He actually served as chairman of the Republican Party in the state of Arkansas for a while.
Okay. That leads into this one. How about this though? because his father was white, he didn't try to pass for white. Did he look very white himself and was like, hey, you know, if you don't ask me, I don't tell?
No, he did not try to pass. He was a proud Black man. Um, he wasn't he wasn't as fair skinned
Oh,
as
really?
some that did, you know, that did live in the area, who were also the children of enslavers. But he was fairly light skinned.
Did he marry?
No, no, we found no record of him marrying or having any children.
Oh. And so he did all those things, but then you said he had something else amazing.
He did. He started a streetcar company in Arkansas. He was the first Black man to own and operate a streetcar company in the United States. It was the Wiley Jones streetcar line. He was eventually sued by a white streetcar company, but he just bought that company and the lawsuit was dropped.
When you say streetcar company, that's not taxi cab. He didn't lay tracks in the city, or what do you mean streetcar company?
He had a mule-drawn streetcar company that had tracks that were about 3 miles in the city that went from the downtown area out to the Wiley Jones Park, which was on the outskirts of the town of Pine Bluff at the time. And so, yeah, he was awarded a contract to build a streetcar company, and he did that.
Man, that's huge. So how wealthy did he get? I mean, you got any dollar numbers?
Yeah, when he died in 1904, his estate was valued at about $300,000, which today would be about 8.5, almost $9 million.
Ooh. Did he can you tell, did he have the trappings of the wealth? Did he live in some big house?
He did.
Whatever.
He lived in a house in downtown Pine Bluff that was, you know, considerably large for the time. He told, you know, there was a report in a newspaper where he had gone to Hot Springs, Arkansas, for some therapeutic, because there were hot springs in the area where people would go for, you know, kind of therapeutic baths. And he had gone, and he was robbed of quite a bit of jewelry and watches while he was in Hot Springs. So he did have the trappings of a wealthy man. And, you know, newspapers all over the country, from the Indianapolis Freeman to newspapers in New York and all around the country, reported on Wiley Jones and his wealth. And after he died, the Adolphus Busch, the founder of Anheuser-Busch, wrote an open letter to the Pine Bluff Daily Graphic, talking about how fine of a man Wiley Jones was and how he considered him a friend.
Right, that's strong. And was he on the radar of Booker T. Washington and National Business League and that kind of thing?
Well, this is so he died in 1904. Okay, so this would have been prior to Booker T and the founding of the National Negro Business League. But there was another Arkansan, John Bush, who was the founder of the Mosaic Templars of America, who was considered to be John Bush's right-hand man. And some people would even say he was Booker T. Washington's henchman. Like when Booker T didn't like something you were doing, you were paid a visit by John Bush.
And so is there another comment on Wiley Jones? Because my next move is, let's talk about the Jose, you know, your place there and all that they did for a moment.
Okay, well, let's talk about, so the Mosaic Templars of America was founded in 1882 by John Bush and Chester Keats. And so it started as just an insurance company for Black people here in the city, but, you know, good things, you can't keep them under, you know, what's the saying, you can't keep a candle under a bushel basket. So word soon spread and the company began to spread. And so by the 1920s, they had over 100,000 members in 26 states and 6 other countries. So they were one of the largest Black-owned businesses in the world at one point.
Wow. Were they one of those Masonic orders?
It
sounds like it.
It does, but they weren't. They were an order like like the Knights and Daughters of Tabor,
Yeah.
the Knights of Pythias, the Odd Fellows. They were a fraternal organization. They were a mutual aid society. So during that period, like I said, there were no welfare organizations. So Black people would get together and create these organizations that were for the mutual aid of the community. And so they would all pay dues. And when there was ever a problem in the community or someone experienced death, then they would pay to have the person buried and provide a tombstone for the deceased person.
Is there one guy who started it who was like really helped it grow to be as big as it was?
Yeah, it was John Bush and Chester Keats.
Okay.
They were the founders in 1882, and they created the organization with that purpose in mind. And so they were born enslaved, but soon, after the war, they became prominent businessmen in the city, working for the U.S. Railway Mail Service. So they were postal clerks, and John Bush was even, they were both active in the Republican Party, and John Bush was the receiver of lands for the state of Arkansas for a while. So anytime people paid their taxes for their land, it went to John Bush, and then he passed it on to the federal government.
Are they, if we gotta, measure, and if you know this one, were they one of the largest mutual aid societies, or whatever the proper term is?
Yeah, I think I would say so. They were, one of the largest Black-owned businesses in the world, but they also, in addition to being that mutual aid and insurance company, they created a nursing school, a printing press, a savings and loan, and they organized temples throughout the country.
Oh, really? That's
huge. They did quite a bit of things.
Now the other one that I do know of was the one that Maggie Lena Walker had in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
Yeah. It wasn't. I mean, she was the president of, and they had a department store, a bank, a newspaper, and so on and so forth. So there were a number of efforts like that throughout the country where the Black folks came together.
Right.
And they called them mutual aid societies.
Yeah. They were for the mutual aid of the community.
Now, I guess lastly, is there symbols like Egyptian symbols and that kind of thing?
Well, their symbol was, you see that symbol, right?
Right.
So you see the MTA stands for Mosaic Templars of America. The 3 V's stands for Veni Vidi Vici, which was one of John Bush's favorite sayings, I came, I saw, I conquered. Then you see the 2 staffs crossed in the middle, and that represents Moses and Aaron, which is where the name Mosaic comes from Moses from the Bible. And then this symbol around the outside is a snake eating its tail, and that's called an Ouroboros, and that represents the never-ending cycle of life. So that was their symbol, and it was found on all of their documents, the pediment, which was on the building that they built in 1913, as well as on the tombstones of members when they died. And there's still quite a few tombstones throughout the Southern United States, and that's how we're working to build membership rolls of who was members of the Mosaic Templars.
When would you say, is there an exact year when the company actually closed or something like that?
Yeah, in the 1930s, they went into receivership during the Depression, and by 1941, they were gone. At least they were gone here in Arkansas and in most of the country. A few chapters in Alabama held out a little while longer, and there's still one chapter in operation now in Barbados in the Caribbean.
Really?
Yeah.
That's huge, man. And so at your place there, you all are a museum, cultural center. What type of exhibits do you have?
Well, right now we are displaying the Smithsonian's traveling exhibit of the Negro Motorist Green Book. Um, that's a really good exhibit that was created by the Smithsonian Museum, and it travels to sites around the country. And so we're the second museum in the country to have it, following the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis. Other than that, we house the Arkansas Black Hall of Fame, and we have our own permanent exhibits, which kind of detail the history of African Americans here in the state of Arkansas. And in September, we're opening a new exhibit. It's a children's gallery that teaches you people how to discuss race and differences with their children.
I got you. Is there maybe you host, you know, your organization hosted to someone? Is there a festival in Little Rock or Pine Bluff that plays some honor to Wiley Jones and to Mosaic Templar?
Well, there's no one. There's not any festivals. We do host the city's Juneteenth event every year.
Oh, I got you.
And we do other things. We host an event in the wintertime called Cocoa and Carols, where we give kids an opportunity to come take free pictures with Black Santa, listen to Christmas carols, and have hot chocolate each year, and that's free for the kids to come out.
I got you.
So we do quite a few things, and because we are a state-sponsored museum, 98% of what we do is free.
Now, last question. You said this is the home. Was it the home or the office or the headquarters of Mosaic?
It was the international headquarters of the Mosaic Templars of America.
So
our building is on the site of where they built their original headquarters, and now we're in a replica because the original building burned in 2005.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And so yours look somewhat similar, and you
It's
can say
it's exactly the same building.
So the office the head guy's office is on the top floor.
It was on the second floor. So the first floor was all retail space. There were several different Black businesses on the first floor. The second floor was the offices of the Mosaic Templars of America, Black lawyers around the city, the Little Rock chapter of the NAACP, Scipio A. Jones, who most people know from the Elaine race massacre of 1919, and having the sentences of 12 Black men convicted of killing some white men overturned. And then on the third and fourth floors was we have an auditorium and a balcony. So they hosted local basketball games, concerts, things like that.
Man,
and we still do some of that now.
That's beautiful.
If they want to find out more about us,
yes,
they can go to our website at mosaictemplarcenter.com or hit us on Facebook at Mosaic Templars, and you can see all of what we're doing. Even on our Facebook page, we have our virtual Juneteenth from the last 2 years still posted, and some other events that we've done over the last 2 years.
Oh, yes. I love it. I love it. And man, I'm so happy you came on the channel to share this with us of that story about Mr. Jones. Because, man, everybody, my viewers, this is what I do. I try to find these guys, and I do. Matter of fact, my man called me, said, I'm ready. Come on, man. Don't forget me now. And that's the excitement that's generated from this. But what happens is there are a ton of stories out there of brothers and sisters who have really made a difference in their community.
Yeah. One of the things that I recently found out, and I'm still working to kind of dig through the story, is that Wiley Jones also owned a baseball team.
So in the Negro League.
Yeah.
Man, bad stuff, man. This is good stuff. This is what I call good Black history, my brothers and sisters. So what I want you to do is hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on this video, because you ain't know about no Wiley Jones. I know you didn't. I didn't know, and I'm better off knowing that. I'm gonna do some more work today, knowing that Wiley Jones did all he could, and he didn't have no education almost. How about that? And you and we complaining. I want you to hit the notifications bell for when the videos come up, you can get motivated real easily by just watching it. And I want you to tell somebody about strong inspirations. Don't keep it to yourself. Watch my movie, everybody. Come on now, and read my book. And then, how about this? Let's go down there to Little Rock and go down there and deal with that museum. Let's support them. Send some money to them. I'll put all the descriptions and website. I'll put it all in the description. Let's go down there and support them people as they doing what they're doing. And to you, my brother, I say with all sincerity, I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind, because we love what you're doing. Learning all this good history and then sharing it with us and sharing it with the people in Little Rock and Pine Bluff and throughout the state of Arkansas and throughout the world. We appreciate you doing that, and tell everybody, hey, we got love for them. We on our way. Bye-bye, we out.
Thank you so much for having me.